So I'm going to talk briefly just about my own experience scaling my own small rental development business. So like Kris mentioned, I am a partner at Toronto Standard. Prior to forming Toronto Standard, I focused on developing my own, basically missing middle rental developments. And that goes back about 3 or 4 years now. So just a quick disclaimer, I'm just talking, this is just for discussion purposes. Obviously get your own legal advice, tax advice. I'm not qualified to give that type of advice. So what are the best ways to scale? Essentially what it comes down to is trying to find deals that pencil really well so that any equity that's invested can be returned to yourself or to the investors at the end of the project. And then essentially the second part is develop a process for every step of your business that you can kind of rinse and repeat and continue on the process without reinventing the wheel at every stage. So this is a project I completed in 2021. I did talk about it briefly last year at last year's Missing Middle Summit, and that was more from like a process standpoint. What I'm going to talk about today is more from an equity standpoint. Like, where do you find equity for these deals? How do you pull out equity, etc. So that multiplex on Vine is 8 units. A friend of mine is my partner on that project. So we're joint venture partners. So this is one way to do it. So it's a JV, a joint venture. My friend put in 25% of the required equity. I put in the rest. So in this case, the title is held by a Bear Trust nominee corp. So the beneficial owners are myself and my partner personally. What that means is any income that flows into the property is treated on the personal level, and therefore it's also taxed at the personal level. So there's benefits to doing it that way versus being taxed at the higher passive income corporate rate. So some pros of a JV, again, just touching on a few things because there's probably a longer list of pros and a long list of cons as well. For us, in this case, it was a really simple structure, not paperwork heavy. I don't think we even had a real management agreement or JV agreement between us, just that we're both on title, we're both beneficial owners of the corp that's on title. So this type of structure is good when interests align. If you both have common interest, you plan to hold on to the project forever, it keeps everybody happy to have, to keep interests aligned. Some of the cons of this setup, if one partner does, have something that changes in their life and they just want out of the project, then what do you do at that point? So you could have a shotgun clause as part of the agreement, but it forces either a sale or the other partner to buy out the other partner. So the next property I'll talk about, this is a totally different structure. So this is a new lane house in the rear of a property that contains an existing triplex. So I was in discussions with an older couple. They were looking to downsize. They were familiar with some of the projects that I was working on, and to them downsizing meant possibly moving into a condo. And they didn't like the idea of moving into a traditional high-rise condo. They wanted something that was more, in tune with the neighborhood. Smaller building, walk up, so it's private, no need for parking and underground, all of that stuff. So the way that we structured this deal, the triplex was vacant when I bought it. It needed to be renovated. So we basically came up with an agreed upon end value for the whole project, including the lane house. So of that end value, the co-owners contributed 25% in cash. So that cash essentially funded the whole renovation and the whole construction of the lane house. So it worked out really well because I basically put in some of my own equity to close on the property, but as far as the renovation and the construction, I didn't have to put in any further equity. Some of the pros, this is a very simple structure as well from a legal standpoint. it's really easy to adapt the terms of a co-ownership agreement. In our case, it's only about a 20-page agreement. And some of the specific terms in our case was that these co-owners that came on board occupy one of the units, so they essentially have dedicated use or exclusive use of a unit, and it is considered their primary residence. The other pro, like I mentioned earlier, is we had this big cash injection that came in, so definitely helped with the economics of the deal. Some of the cons, again, priorities can change over time. Maybe interests, are not aligned in the future at some point. In our case, there's a no sale provision, so this is an asset that I'll own forever. The reason that there's a no sale provision is that because the co-owners who are occupying one of the units, they don't want to ever have to move again. Like, this is kind of their final, home that they'll live in. So on to sort of bigger projects, and this is something that we're developing under the Toronto Standard brand. It's I don't know if I can back up, but anyway, it's about a 43-unit project. It falls under the Major Streets guidelines, so we're pretty excited about it. In this case, it's set up as more of a private equity, like a GPLP structure, where Toronto Standard will be the operating partners, the GP, and then we'll be looking to pool capital on the LP side or limited partner side. So again, there's a list of pros and cons. This setup works well with bigger deals where it's hard to find a single investor. So you can, like I mentioned, pool capital together, which makes the economics more viable. On the LP side, LPs do not have liability when it comes to guaranteeing the debt, among other things. So it's really it's also a passive investment for limited partners. They don't do anything on a day-to-day basis. They just invest their money, and then we do the rest. One of the cons is that shares in the limited partnership are not necessarily liquid, but that's really the case with real estate in general. But shares could be transferred to an existing owner, another LP, or a new owner that's brought on board. And that's about it, short and sweet. My email address is here, my phone number is here. If anybody has any questions, any comments, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm always accessible. Thanks very much for listening.